I can't tell who's a good person and a bad person. That's why I carry myself the way I do in some ways. Or why I've made decisions that most people I've grew up with don't understand. Why do I have some special perception or something? I think it's because when I was young, I liked reading the red letters of the Bible, Jesus' words. And he goes deep. I mean, he says he didn't come to get rid of the Ten Commandments, but he came to fulfill the law. Well, call that the law of the Ten Commandments. But that's the main laws for governing. It's primary laws he gave us to govern with and to govern ourselves with, but to govern nations with and ourselves. But he goes deep. He says, if you're angry at somebody without a cause, to forgive right away because you're as guilty as the sin of murder already in your heart. I mean, so he goes deep like that. And then he goes into politics and says, when he sees the lady who has multiple husbands and the Pharisees are about to stone her, he says, he who is without sin cast the first stone. I think that's the right woman. I think he had two instances with a lady at the well. I'm not sure about that. I forget. But there was one instance where he told the men there, he who is without sin cast the first stone. Well, that's political. I mean, if you look at how we run our justice system, our prison system, a lot of times people want to punish folks. And really, we should be more about, if people steal from folks, having people pay their debt and pay back their victims, for instance, instead of being worried about punishment, because we're not perfect. So how am I going to decide how much somebody should be punished? It's not for there could be an element of punishing. The Bible does teach to spare the rod, spoil the child. But I'll give you an example of why I think that psychology matters. It's if a kid touches the stove, wants to touch the stove and won't take no for an answer, then you give them a spanking, I think, and help them relate pain to, but you do it in a safe place on the rear end with a paddle or a belt or something. Some say belt's too much. I don't know, but it's not going to harm them. You don't beat them. It's a place that can sting or hurt, but it's not going to bring harm to them, right? So, but it helps them relate pain and the fact that they need to be punished because they won't listen. So it's talking about children, though, punishing children because they have to learn things and they might not relate. Don't run into the street. Don't go into the street, especially on a busy road. They may not get it until you bring them some pain in a loving way to warn them, not because you don't want them getting run over, right? So that's not abuse to do that. But you don't do it when you've lost your temper. You don't punish until you've calmed down. That's the way to do that. But back to, if I can remember the other subject. How do I know if somebody's a good or bad person? I don't know. And you don't know until you get to know somebody. And first of all, how do you define good and bad? There is no really good and bad person. In some ways, you can define it that way. You can call somebody bad who does not care about their neighbors, who really has no regard, and they are murderous and they're unrepentant. So even when it comes to, if you want to call somebody criminal, I mean, we're all criminals in the sense that we're all sinners. All people are sinners. So there are people who want to be Pharisees, and they end up being oppressors, and they end up loving to sometimes oppress somebody and prove that they'll fall down and they'll relapse or something, or if you take all their money and they'll go steal. They'll go steal if you find a way to supposedly righteously take their money because they don't deserve to have it because of their irresponsibility or this or that. And then you put them in a predicament that makes them real desperate, and you might tempt them to steal just to prove that they would steal if you put them in that position. You're the evil one for putting them in that position. You're not supposed to say, well, they're not supposed to steal no matter what. I agree. You don't steal. You teach people not to steal. And that's one thing you want to stick out because you want to love your neighbors. But that's I'm just showing that Pharisees, the Pharisee nature, a lot of times they're the ones that's being scandalous, and they're the ones judging who's trying to judge who's bad, but they're the ones being bad. Call it evil, right? So I don't know who's good and bad. I just know I like to be able to try to open lines of communication with people from all cultures and ethnicities, uh, and to bring Jesus into the subject if I can, or at least show his love and forgiveness and redemption and try understanding. Mostly I like to show people some understanding, that I understand they're coming from a different point than me. And that's when I've been in situations where I'm afraid to talk and don't, and also feel guilty because I've been told not to hang out with this person or that person, don't go there. And I don't believe it. In our divided society where they've made medicine laws that have somehow created a drug cartel society that's been, I feel like the people in ghettos are basically slaves to that system. And now they may not view it that way. A lot of them view it as they are the hustlers and players, but a lot of the hustlers and players are the ones making slaves out of half of their neighborhoods. So a lot of the die-hard ones, right? So a lot of people don't understand it because you still get rewards. They have a reward system for those people, and a lot of it's not good rewards because they get rewarded with drugs a lot of times. So they're rewarded, and that just passes the time, helps them pass the time, and it's not necessarily. They may get the better drugs, and that's what I mean by better is they have trick drugs that pick people up, drop them, and make them fiend for more. And then you have some that are closer to the natural state that would be more subtle, not as strong in effect, but they last longer too. And so you're not fiending for it. So some of those that do those games may have connections to the more pure forms, like the more natural plant forms that God created, right? And so, but we got a system where God does not, there's a verse, and I forgot the reference, but God does not give the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. And so most of America has fallen, maybe the world even, it's the way people are, they've fallen for the spirit of fear when it comes to medicinal science. And we are supposed to be cautious and careful, even with good medicines. I have to do it with caffeine all the time. I fall for it too. I fall for the caffeine. So there's people. The weird part is what we've done is promoted discrimination, and there's people that would threaten to kill me when I talk about caffeine. And these are people out in homeless areas that are predators and maybe kill homeless people. I say that because I'm homeless basically. I've been homeless, and I've had white men usually who want to kill a person or talk about killing addicts and things like that. And but by the way, does God love addicts? Are we supposed to love our neighbors and love addicts? Yes, right. So, but there are guys. I've seen black men that do it too. I've seen Asian men, but mostly white men in America who have pretended to be homeless. And then I've had a situation where one took me in a Publix once, trying to talk me into letting them buy me a sub sandwich. I didn't want to go. I was going to go to Walmart next door. And in hindsight, but they're insistent on buying me a meal and offering me a drink. And in hindsight, they had spiked the drink. And I didn't know, but I was kind of goofing off at the Publix a little bit, and I didn't realize till it was over. He was spiking my drink. And I don't know what his goal was, but but I had heard him say stuff about how he hates poor people. He talked about how he comes out of the woods and kills people with his rifle. I forget if he mentioned shotgun or rifle or what. And so, and he was referring to people who steal or people who are mainly he seemed to hate anybody who would have an addiction issue, or not addiction issue, but using issue to where if they got a little drunk and acted clumsy or anything else, he wants to kill them. But who supports that? The church. Oh, I didn't mean to get on this subject, but the church and the cartel. So I don't know who's good and bad. I don't view people as, like a lot of people, if somebody's smoking a cigarette, that they're just automatically bad and worse than everybody else. I don't do that. I don't. That's not my view. My view is, though, you should take care of your temple. You should have a desire to try to quit. The one I've seen different personalities, and I'm still having to learn what is good and bad for me. Who's going to influence me negatively, and who I should stay away from it. So I haven't learned that, and I'm 52. I mean, I haven't learned that all the way because I view a lot of people in church as bad people. I mean, I do. The ones who are hateful and just stereotype people out in the world, we're supposed to be active in the world, trying to go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Now, I brought up a verse earlier. I don't think I finished explaining. I forgot what it was. But I'm just going to keep going because I'm running out of time here. So I didn't really go over the subject before I spoke on it. I just know I've thought of it when I wrote my Reality Harmonizer Bob books 4 years ago. I came up with define bad, define good. And I did some definings of that. And really, we're all sinners. And we're either all repentant sinners or we're all unrepentant sinners. And if you believe in Christ and heaven and hell, you're gonna want to repent. You're gonna, if you love God and you follow His command and love people, and sometimes you have a natural uh, empathy and sympathy for people, knowing that they're gonna go to hell if they don't choose heaven, Christ's heaven. And by the way, you know, another definition of hell would be choosing other heavens that have no evidence of existing. So, like, if you sign up for Buddha's heaven instead of Jesus' heaven, how do you get there? I mean, it's just not the only heaven that is proven to exist is Christ's heaven, and it's because He rose from the dead and ascended to heaven almost 40 days later. So He proved its existence when we watched Him fly up into the sky. Say we human beings. He had human being witnesses there. You have Muhammad for Islam. He doesn't have many witnesses. When he's kind of like Moses at the burning bush. I don't know who witnessed, by the way, Moses with the burning bush. We hear the story maybe from Moses. So Muhammad has, when he first went to the mountain and had an experience with Allah, I think it was that, something like that. Or he was out by himself somewhere, and we hear about that experience. I don't know that he had any witnesses. I'm not saying he didn't for sure, but if he did, it may have been one or two. If he didn't, he didn't. He was more like Moses, who I don't think had many witnesses at the burning bush. I may be wrong. But most things that are written in the Bible, there were many witnesses. But in that one instance, there wasn't, maybe, or there weren't many. And so, but Jesus lived here 33 years. When we don't hear a whole lot about the whole 33 years, but we hear about His 3 years of ministry, and we hear about His early childhood. So, anyhow, there's a lot of witnesses throughout that time. And when He was with the disciples and traveled with the disciples, that's what they wrote about. So they were the right people to write. That was the right books to put in the Bible. I mean, with the people that were with Him day in and day out, traveling while He's preaching the gospel and preaching His theologies and different things, and just teaching us. So He taught us how to pray. He taught us. So basically, we can use His teachings to help prison reform and everything else. And people will say, well, that's a theocracy. No, it's not. He's the best teacher that ever lived. If you look at the Ten Commandments, what better laws are there? We're sitting here, we're letting the drug cartel run our justice system, in a sense, or the way we do things in the streets. They believe, marijuana smokers believe it's okay to kill, basically talk bad about a meth user and have him killed, or talk bad about I'll preface, meth can be pretty bad when it's real strong, but they have stuff called speed that's not as strong. And so you can make anything too strong or not as strong enough, and then in the streets, they mix it. So I've seen people in the past. I've worked night shift at grocery stores years ago. People didn't know it, but I knew it because they offered me speed. And I wouldn't say they were the best, nicest people, partly maybe because of the speed or because of paranoia, because it's against the law. They were paranoid. And so, but I turned it down. And these people, though, it helped them work night shift. It wasn't a strong form, as strong a form as some of the others. So it's probably in a powder form or something. And um, I've seen different jobs when I worked in Atlanta where people used some form of speed and it helped them work late nights and stuff. And so I'm not saying that's good for you or anything. I'm just saying, uh, I forget my original point, what I was saying, frankly. But, and I'm getting my memory back. I'm finally getting over the caffeine, and I think I have a new dietary idea to help me with that, to help me stay, because that stuff ruins my digestive system. I gain weight, I crave sugar, and so I get dehydrated from it, and then I crave food, too much food and more sugar. And I've thought of a few tricks to help combat that, so I don't gain weight too fast. But now I'm caught up. Some on sleep. I'm caught up on getting caught up on my diet and that little party, that chocolate and chocolate and coffee party. I like mixing a little bit coffee in my of instant coffee in my chocolate ice cream or my chocolate drinks, and not too much, but the kind I have is really strong. And it just tastes good, the mix of chocolate and coffee, I think. But you don't need much coffee, though, to make your chocolate flavor taste good. But it snuck up on me. I had too much caffeine. And the results were I had a stiff, dried out throat, dried out vocal cords. So I haven't been able to sing recently. Therefore, I'm talking. But um, so I've had a lot to do in catching up with recovering emails and stuff from lost some phones, and haven't been able to record and do all that until now. So, but I've also had a lot of learning experiences and stuff recently that helped me put some things in perspective. Because people, so who's good and bad people? I don't know. I'm going to summarize this and just get back to that point. But um, the fear of the Lord, that's the verse I forgot. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So people are hypochondriacs on the subject of medicinal science, and we just let evolutionists run it. We've let evolutionists make all our laws, and there is no love your neighbor in evolution. There is no, there are no 10 commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie, bear false witness against your neighbor. And that's a big one. And so, those are good laws. There's no better laws than those. And he doesn't put in there, thou shalt not use medicine. And wine is a medicine. All herbs that God made for man are medicines. A lot of the herbs, sometimes I don't think with herbs he's referring to vegetables. I think he's referring to medicinal plants and spices, which are semi-medicinal. They're semi-medicinal in that they have so many antioxidants. But it's still a food medicine. I would call spices like cinnamon, oregano, thyme, basil, garlic, and onion are a cross between. They're food, but they're a herb in a sense. I don't know they're vegetable, but they're better than an antibiotic a lot of times in raw form, and they kill bad bacteria and leave your good bacteria. An antibiotic kills your good and bad bacteria. And so we've fast forward. There's some things the antibiotics help with. And those are, I would call them, I don't know if they use sulfur. Sulfur is high. And garlic and onions have high sulfur. But so does well water. But anyhow, so who's good and bad? I don't know. That's why I believe in going and befriending everybody. And I'll just rewind. I do have in my lifetime viewed people in the ghettos as slaves taken over by the drug cartels, and who don't care if they get people put in and out of jail. And a lot of the dealers today I've run into in ghettos, and they're usually black dealers, not always, but it's that they want to set people up to get caught, put them out in public, and they want to try to just hound and talk them into using and do those kind of things. And they like to do it specifically in public places, even where there's cameras and all that. And I don't know how they sit there and do that, and they get people in trouble, but they don't get in trouble a lot of times. So it doesn't, I don't get that. But that's uh, what the cartels do, and they're part of the cartel when they're doing that. In a sense, they're part of a gang or that's connected with cartel that that has authority over the police and judges. I guess I don't know because because they can do it on camera, do it whatever they want all day long, and then they finally they get a guy that smokes for the first time or gives in to them for the first time on something on a bad day who you lost sleep all night. That can happen. So it's not. I don't think it's a big sin, by the way, to use a medicine or a caffeine if you've lost that insomnia. Now, I disagree with all these people that say, "How dare you? That's godless. That's of the devil. You're opening your life to demons." God created medicine because we don't have in heaven we no more sorrow, no more pain, no more crying, and so they're playing on the spirit of fear and hypochondria. But the point is, you can make good medicines. So anyway, there's tricky. So how do I know who's good and bad? There's a lot of people that are a slave to that system because they use medicine, but they're not. They get some of them get some of the better medicines, and some of them don't. But then they're stuck to it. They have to be stuck taking it more than they need to because there's a simple rule of thumb that I came up with. You don't use a medicine when a doctor wants money. You're supposed to use it when you feel you need a medicine. And that's assuming that I'm right and that it's not a sin to use medicine. And the Bible does not indicate that it's a sin to use medicine. And so we're going to talk in realistic terms here instead of psychotic, hypochondriac terms that the church and the cartel does. So the funny thing is, mainly the churches today and the cartels support the same thing. They don't want legal forms of medicine, safe legal forms of medicines that are in the streets. They don't want safer legal forms like 2% instead of 50%. They'd rather leave 50 to 60 to 70% in the streets and stay segregated and let that just be in the ghettos. Let it, let people, if people go to the ghetto and they get robbed, that's their fault. If they go to the ghetto and they get hurt, that's their fault. They shouldn't have been hanging out there. Instead of expecting us not to have any ghettos. We shouldn't have any ghettos. If you define ghetto as slaves to the cartel neighborhoods, neighborhoods that have become enslaved to the cartel, and they tell when you go walking through there. I've walked through tons of ghettos, and I've had police stop me years ago and tell me you can't come. Told me to leave there and said you can't walk through here. There's nothing but drugs in these neighborhoods. And I said, well, I'm walking here now, so there's something. Drugs aren't the only thing here now because I'm here. How about that? It's a free country. I'm allowed to work where I want, right? And so, in a sense, the police protect that by not letting people who are there who just want to make friends or whatever, or be able to be friendly, show kindness to people. They help protect it, but also the people out in the streets that are pushing the drugs, they'll say, get out of here if you don't have any money. And they'll say, white boy, a lot of times. If you don't got no money, don't come around here, white boy. Well, they're trying to keep it. They're enslaving the neighborhood when they're doing that. They don't want anybody there making friends with outsiders who are from a drug-free type culture. But I got to go now. I'm out of time. I just happened to run out of time. So, but I'll just say real quick, eventually I learn who's good and bad, but I don't know who's good and bad at first because some people are slaves in the ghettos and some people are the slave masters in the ghettos, right? And who do they work for? That maybe they work for the Mexican cartel, or maybe they work for a white or black cartel within the nation, within our nation, and a lot of times it appears that the Democrat Party is actually the one running that stuff. They're the one pushing for more cartel slavery in our nation. And so they've lied about America being the leader in slavery years ago while they're underhandedly running this slave network through the drug cartels. And so, and the biggest nation, the recipient of slaves was Brazil. So when they're calling it racist to let cartel, to try to stop cartel from crossing our borders and terrorists from crossing our borders, and they're acting like it's racist. Well, some of the people they're letting across our borders were bigger players in the Atlantic slave trade than America ever was. And really, it was the Democrat side of America that supported that, not the Confederate side, and it ends up being the Democrat side. The Democrat side basically ends up supporting the British side that was trying to take over America and stop people from being free and all that stuff. So how can, with all that, when you put all those conspiracies together, and they're not theories, these things happened. These things are happening. It's not a theory. You see it happen, and if you go try to learn different cultures like I've done, and most people fall for that prejudice. I think it's bad when people in the church are just prejudiced and they fall for the stereotypes, and I don't like being around that. And then they're also telling me not to exercise my freedom of speech, and so that I'm not a good speaker. So I'm stumped by people. I've been stumped. I don't have the great memory, but I have a lot of knowledge packed in my head, a lot of studied, and partly because I've been open to various cultures, learning different people that are affected by various cultures. We'll put it like that, and hoping that, even though I fell into temptations and things, and didn't have the best testimony or witness, but what I did have is still, though, was I was always kind to people. They saw God's forgiveness. But as far as I had a problem because I didn't know what kind of woman I wanted to date. That's probably was the core why I fell into temptation, because I didn't feel like I fit in with church women, which I viewed mostly as influenced by a Pharisee-run church today. I view our religion as very Pharisaical. Most Christian religions today, based on being disillusioned by medicinal science, and then not really speaking much against evolutionists, because they just look at, they don't realize even that they run science, our science field, and they just respect them if they've done a good job and worked hard, and they're doctors, but they're working hard for what? To promote evolution and demonize medicine, right? Because it gets them a lot of stuff by doing that. It brings a lot of chaos. It's a domino effect in a sense. So they've in a sense, the science community has created the drug cartels along with legislators who have let them lie. And there's probably, like the coca leaf, for instance, is my best example. And the cartel people hate me for saying, who are you going to experiment with on the coca leaf tea? Well, people who do the crack cocaine. The coca leaf tea is not going to be nearly as bad as crack cocaine. You take 2 leaves of crack cocaine, might, one rock might have 500 leaves crushed and concentrated. I don't know. It might have 100. But if you drink the natural tea and you're not concentrating it, you just put 2 leaves, for instance. Take 2 leaves from the tree. They've managed to keep that out of the country. But they send in their strongest forms, the lines of coke. And what they do is they crush it and make powder. I don't know the whole process, or I don't understand all of the exact science, the chemistry of it, but I do understand the psychology of it. And I understand that it's a plant that helps depression, and it helps pain. And so anything that helps pain can be addictive. Anything that does anything to you, it's best to never try something. It's spinach. If you never eat spinach, you'll never miss it. But once you try anything, it's going to be a part of your mind's appetite. And that's not addiction, but there's always going to, if you liked it, there's always going to be a chance you'll try it again. But you have to know how dangerous the things are. You don't need medicine. You only need food, technically, for the most part, unless you have an ailment, you have pain. And so the Bible does allow it for pain. It tells you to be very careful and not trust yourself. And it actually allows for stronger medicine for surgeries, for on your deathbed. The Bible shows that in Proverbs chapter 31. That doesn't mean, when you read Proverbs 31, it doesn't mean it's taken away from all the warnings and other passages. It doesn't mean it wants you to use every day. It wants you to have your mind on God. And if you believe in God, you're not going to use every day. If you really love God, because you might go use a medicine and then you're going to be like, I didn't like that my mind couldn't focus on God. You're just going to bother you, and you're going to come back off it and hope and use it medicinally mostly. But some people will define, when you do something medicinally, when you've had nobody to talk to and you finally run to a medicine, to define that as a sin, and it's not a sin. But it is a higher calling to keep trying to stay off it, to redeem your time, and to share God with more people, because that's what matters. And I'm totally out of time right now. But so I don't look at the world like it's good and bad people. I think that a lot of people are influenced by other folks, and I do believe in the blame game, blaming the people who are guilty of certain things, right? And it does affect people.